Hey, beautiful souls, welcome back to Soul Stories. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to join our family. Stay with us, because a new love story is about to begin. The wagon wheels creaked against the rutted path as Martha Brennan clutched the worn letter in her trembling hands. She had read it 17 times since leaving her family's farmstead 3 days ago. Yet the words still burned fresh wounds into her heart. Her father's voice echoed through the ink, explaining to the mountain man named Silas Crawford that the bride he had requested was on her way, that she was healthy and capable, and that he should expect her arrival before the first autumn frost. What the letter did not say, what Martha had overheard through the thin walls of their farmhouse kitchen, was the cruel laughter that had accompanied her father's decision to send her. The memory of her mother's cackling still rang in her ears like a discordant bell. They had called it Providence when Silas Crawford's letter arrived seeking a wife, a woman willing to live in isolation on his mountain homestead in exchange for security and partnership. Her 3 sisters, each blessed with their mother's delicate features and golden hair, had recoiled at the prospect of leaving civilization for some hermit's cabin. But Martha, with her broad shoulders, her jaw too square, her nose too prominent, her hair the color of muddy creek water, she was expendable. Let the mountain man have the ugly one, her father had said, and the whole family had laughed as though he had told the funniest joke they had ever heard. Martha folded the letter and tucked it into her bodice, pressing her palm against her chest where the paper crinkled against her heartbeat. She had stopped crying somewhere around the 2nd day of travel. Tears were useless currency in a world that had already declared her worthless, and she refused to spend them on people who had discarded her like yesterday's dishwater. The driver, an elderly man named Horace, who had spoken perhaps 20 words during their entire journey, pointed ahead with his whip. Through the thinning trees, Martha could see a cabin perched on a ridge, smoke curling from its stone chimney like a gray ribbon against the darkening sky. The structure was larger than she had expected, built from logs so thick they must have taken tremendous effort to move and stack. A barn stood nearby, and she could make out the shapes of animals in a fenced pasture, goats perhaps, and what looked like a sturdy draft horse. "That's Crawford's place," Horace said. "I'll drop you at the path. Don't go no further myself." Martha nodded, gathering her single bag containing everything she owned in this world. 3 dresses, all practical and plain, a hairbrush that had belonged to her grandmother, a small Bible with a cracked leather cover, seeds she had secretly collected from her mother's garden, the only inheritance she had claimed for herself. The wagon stopped, and Martha climbed down without assistance, her boots hitting the hard-packed earth with a solid thump. Horace was already turning the horses before she could thank him, his wagon disappearing back down the mountain as though demons pursued him. She stood alone in the gathering dusk, the weight of her solitude pressing against her shoulders like a physical force. The path to the cabin wound upward through a stand of pines, their needles carpeting the ground in a soft brown layer that muffled her footsteps. Martha walked slowly, not from fear exactly, but from a strange reluctance to arrive at her destination. Once she reached that cabin, her fate would be sealed. She would belong to a stranger, a man who had purchased her like livestock, sight unseen. She was perhaps 50 yards from the cabin when a voice stopped her cold. "You can come on up. I've been watching you since the wagon stopped." Martha's eyes scanned the tree line until she spotted him, a figure emerging from behind a massive oak as though he had grown from the bark itself. Silas Crawford was not what she had imagined. She had pictured someone old and bent, desperate for a wife because no woman would willingly choose such isolation. Instead, the man before her stood well over 6 feet tall, his shoulders broad beneath a worn cotton shirt, his dark hair tied back from a face that was weathered but far from elderly. He looked to be in his mid-30s, perhaps 10 years her senior, with eyes the color of pine needles in shadow. He carried a rifle loosely in one hand, not pointed at her, but clearly ready. His gaze moved over her face, down her travel-stained dress, back up to meet her eyes. Martha braced herself for the disappointment, the disgust, the moment when he would realize what kind of trick had been played on him. "You're Martha Brennan," he said. It was not a question. "I am." He nodded slowly, something unreadable passing across his features. "Long journey. You must be hungry." Martha blinked. No comment on her appearance, no demand to know why her family had sent her instead of one of her prettier sisters. Just an acknowledgement of her basic human need for food after 3 days of travel. The kindness of it, small as it was, nearly broke through her carefully constructed walls. "I could eat," she admitted. Silas turned and walked toward the cabin, clearly expecting her to follow. Martha adjusted her bag on her shoulder and climbed the remaining distance, her legs burning from the steep incline. By the time she reached the porch, he had already disappeared inside, leaving the door open behind him. The interior of the cabin smelled of wood smoke and dried herbs, of leather, and something savory that made her stomach clench with hunger. A fire crackled in the large stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across walls lined with shelves. Books, she realized with surprise. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, their spines creating a patchwork of colors and sizes that drew her eye like a magnet. "You read?" she asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. Silas was at the stove ladling something from a pot into a wooden bowl. He glanced over his shoulder at her, one eyebrow raised. "When I have time. Everything I can get my hands on." The admission felt dangerous somehow, like revealing a secret weakness. Her mother had always said that too much reading made women unmarriageable, that no man wanted a wife who thought herself clever. Silas set the bowl on a rough-hewn table and pulled out a chair. "Sit, eat. We can talk after you've got something in your stomach." Martha sat, too tired and hungry to argue. The stew was simple, but flavorful. Chunks of venison and root vegetables in a rich broth seasoned with herbs she did not recognize. She ate slowly, conscious of his eyes on her, waiting for the questions she dreaded. When her bowl was empty, Silas refilled it without asking. He sat across from her, his large hands wrapped around a cup of something that steamed in the cool evening air. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Your father's letter said you were capable," Silas finally said. "Didn't say much else." Martha set down her spoon. "What did you expect? Honestly, someone older, someone worn down by life who saw this as a last chance." His eyes met hers directly. "You're young, maybe 22, 23. Why would your family send you to a stranger on a mountain?" There it was. The question she had been dreading. Martha could lie, could construct some story about adventure or independence or religious calling, but looking at this man with his steady gaze and his cabin full of books, she found she did not want to start whatever this was with falsehood. "They sent me as a joke," she said flatly. "I'm the ugly daughter. My sisters are beautiful, and they wouldn't come, so my father thought it would be amusing to send me instead, to punish you for having the audacity to seek a mail-order bride." The words hung in the air between them, brutal and honest. Martha waited for his reaction, his anger at being tricked, his rejection of the flawed goods that had been delivered to his doorstep. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkness that had fully claimed the mountain. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I left society 12 years ago because I was tired of its games. Tired of people who said one thing and meant another, who valued appearance over substance, who measured worth in all the wrong ways." He turned to face her. "Your family sounds like exactly the kind of people I escaped." "They are," Martha agreed quietly. "And you, are you like them?" She considered the question seriously. "I try not to be, but I grew up in their house, learned their lessons. Sometimes I catch myself thinking in their patterns, judging by their standards." She paused. "I'm working on unlearning." Silas nodded slowly. "That's honest. more honest than most people manage. He returned to his chair, sitting heavily. I should tell you something, Martha Brennan. I didn't advertise for a wife because I was lonely or because I needed someone to cook and clean. I can do those things myself, been doing them for years. Then why? Because this land is hard, and I'm not getting younger. Because I want to build something that lasts beyond my own lifetime. Because I've learned that solitude is a good teacher but a poor companion. He met her eyes again. I need a partner, someone who can work beside me, think for themselves, face hardship without crumbling. Beauty fades. Pretty faces don't clear fields or tend livestock or make decisions when everything goes wrong. Martha felt something shift in her chest, some long-held tension beginning to loosen. What if I'm not what you need? Then we figure that out together. I'm not going to send you back to people who treated you like a punchline. His jaw tightened. Unless that's what you want, it's not. The words came out fiercer than she intended. I have nowhere else to go, and even if I did, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The ghost of a smile crossed Silas's weathered face. Stubborn. Good. You'll need that up here. That first night, Martha slept in a small room off the main cabin that Silas had prepared for her arrival, a narrow bed with clean quilts, a washstand, a window that looked out over the valley below. She lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the mountain, the wind in the pines, the distant call of an owl, the creak and settle of the cabin around her. For the first time in her memory, no one was making her feel small. No one was reminding her of her inadequacies. The silence felt like mercy. The weeks that followed tested her in ways she had not anticipated. Life on the mountain was relentless work, and Silas did not spare her because of her gender. He taught her to chop wood, to check trap lines, to read the weather in the clouds and the behavior of animals. Her hands blistered and bled, then calloused into something stronger. Her shoulders ached, her back protested, but slowly, incrementally, her body adapted. And something else happened, something Martha had never expected. Silas listened to her. When she suggested moving the goat pen to better drainage, he considered her reasoning and agreed. When she proposed starting an herb garden based on what she had read about mountain medicinal plants, he helped her prepare the soil. Her opinions mattered. Her thoughts had value. You see things I miss, he told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and rose. Different persp. Active. It's useful. Martha felt her cheeks warm at the simple praise. I just notice details, always have. That's a skill, not just a habit. He was quiet for a moment. Your family never saw that, did they? They saw what they wanted to see. A plain face that couldn't catch a husband, a mouth that talked too much, hands that were too rough. She held up her palms, now even more callous than before. Never occurred to them that those hands could build something. Silas reached over and took one of her hands in his, turning it to examine her palm in the fading light. His touch was gentle despite its roughness. These are good hands, Martha, strong, capable. The moment stretched between them, charged with something new. Martha met his eyes and found warmth there, and respect, and something else she was afraid to name. Winter came hard and fast, burying the mountain in snow that reached the windowsills. Martha discovered that Silas had prepared well. Root cellar stocked with preserved food, woodshed filled to capacity, every crack in the cabin sealed against the bitter cold. They were trapped together for months, and in that enforced intimacy, something grew between them. He read to her by firelight, his deep voice bringing stories to life while she mended clothing or worked on the quilt she was piecing from fabric scraps. She taught him the songs her grandmother had sung, old ballads about love and loss and the persistence of hope. They talked for hours about philosophy and religion and the nature of happiness, about their pasts and their hopes for the future. One night, deep in February when the world outside was locked in ice, Silas set down his book and looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. I want to marry you properly, he said. In the spring, when we can get to town, I want to stand in front of witnesses and make vows." Martha's hands stilled on her sewing. "You don't have to. Our arrangement was already—" "I'm not talking about arrangements." He crossed the room and knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "I'm talking about love, Martha. I'm talking about the fact that you've become everything I didn't know I was looking for. You're brave and smart and stubborn as a mule, and I cannot imagine this mountain without you on it." Tears spilled down Martha's cheeks, but for the first time she could remember, they were not tears of pain or rejection. "I'm not beautiful, Silas. I never will be." He reached up and cupped her face in his work-roughened hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "You're the most beautiful thing on this mountain. Not because of how you look, but because of who you are. Because of the way you face every challenge like it personally offended you. Because of your laugh and your curiosity and your refusal to give up." He kissed her forehead gently. "They sent you here as a joke, but you became everything I ever wanted." They married in April, when the snow had melted and the first wildflowers dotted the meadow below their cabin. The ceremony was small, witnessed by Horace the wagon driver and a few other mountain folk who had become their neighbors. Martha wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Silas had traded for, the first pretty thing she had ever owned. But it was not the dress that made her beautiful that day. It was the joy radiating from her face, the certainty in her voice as she spoke her vows, the way her hand fit perfectly in her husband's rough palm. Months later, a letter arrived from her father demanding to know why she had not written, asking if the mountain man had thrown her out yet, inquiring whether she was ready to come home and admit her failure. Martha read it once, then fed it to the fire. She had no failures to admit. She had a home, a partner, a life built on mutual respect and genuine love. She had everything her family had told her she would never deserve. The ugly daughter had won,